They tried to destroy me with lies, betrayal, and even a $2 million insurance scam, but they didn't realize one thing: I was always 2 steps ahead. What started as their game of manipulation is about to end on my terms. I still remember the day I left my hometown as if it were yesterday. The crisp autumn air carried the earthy aroma of fallen leaves, a scent that seemed to whisper both endings and beginnings. With my old pickup truck loaded with everything I held dear, I set off, ready to leave behind the pain that had taken root in my life. Betrayal and deceit had poisoned my world, and I knew that the only way to truly heal was to put miles between myself and the memories. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was a necessary one. After hours of driving, I stumbled upon a sleepy little town that immediately felt like the right place for a fresh start. The streets were quiet, the pace of life slower, and the locals greeted me with a warmth that felt almost unfamiliar. It had a certain charm, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you believe in second chances. As I explored, I came across an old, run-down gas station and garage that had been sitting on the market for what seemed like ages. Something about it caught my eye. I could see its potential, even through the layers of dust and disrepair. I decided to take a leap of faith and made an offer, low enough that I expected it to be turned down. To my surprise, the seller accepted, and just like that, this forgotten property became the cornerstone of my new life. One quiet Saturday afternoon, I found myself sitting in the local tavern, a place that had quickly become my haven. Shortly after settling in this town, I had taken over the gas station and repair shop. It was a bargain, really. The previous owner had been desperate to sell after it sat untouched for 2 years. That little business became my lifeline, a project to focus on while I worked to rebuild both my career and my spirit. My first order of business was a big one. I transformed the space. I built a retail store facing the gas station, knowing it would fill a need for the town after its only grocery store began closing early in the evenings. I moved the gas pumps closer to the storefront, making them more visible and convenient for customers, while leaving enough room for parking. The changes worked. The store became busiest during the evening hours, staying open 24/7 to serve the community. At the same time, the garage, nestled at the back of the lot, maintained regular hours, handling everything from everyday maintenance to special projects on Saturdays. At first, my decision to sell basic liquor in the store ruffled a few feathers, particularly at the local bar. But eventually, even the skeptics came around. The store's success brought jobs and a new sense of energy to the area, and the added income didn't hurt either. It wasn't long before the business really started to thrive. The turning point came when I restructured the store's merchandising, an idea inspired by a woman who showed me how a few small adjustments could make all the difference. After hiring additional staff, the business quickly picked up, and I was able to repay the equity loan much sooner than I'd expected. The demand grew so rapidly, especially on Friday and Saturday nights, that I had to double the number of employees to keep up. Bar patrons would flood the store, buying all sorts of junk food, and Sundays were just as profitable, with cold beer flying off the shelves at prices the locals appreciated. One Saturday evening, I found myself at my favorite corner of the bar, nursing a double shot of Jack Daniels with ice water and a slice of lemon on the side. I had just wrapped up an 8-month project that had tested both my patience and skills, replacing the steering column in an old pickup truck that was practically a family heirloom. The truck had been passed down through generations since the 1940s, and the owner had no intention of letting it go. In fact, he joked that he'd be buried in it if he could. Finding the parts had been a feat, requiring a mix of luck and ingenuity, as I had to fabricate several custom fixtures to get everything working again. Sitting there, savoring the drink, I felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The bar was in its lull, that golden window between 4 and 7 p.m., when most of the regulars had already finished dinner, and the night crowd hadn't yet arrived. In a couple of hours, the place would be alive with music, laughter, and the sound of boots on the dance floor. Farmers often brought their daughters to unwind after long days in the fields, and the lively atmosphere gave the whole town a place to celebrate the simple joys of life. In the 6.5 years I'd been in this town, I had built a solid reputation. People knew me as reliable and fair, someone who could be trusted to get the job done. The locals welcomed me like family, keeping an eye out for anything unusual and always sharing news that might be useful. Saturdays had become my day to unwind and reflect, and my weekly visit to the bar was a ritual I looked forward to. It was my time to clear my head and reset before the week ahead. But that particular evening, the peace I treasured was shattered. As I sat there, deep in thought, the door opened, and in walked two people I never expected, or wanted, to see. The woman was my ex-wife's twin sister, and the young man at her side was someone I once called my son. My heart sank as memories I had tried so hard to bury came rushing back, unbidden and unwelcome. Seeing them was a cruel reminder of the betrayal that had uprooted my life. The boy, now a young man, looked more and more like his biological father, a painful confirmation of truths I had ignored for too long. They say the truth always finds its way to the surface, and here it was, staring me in the face. Why were they here? Why now? I watched from the corner of my eye as they approached the bartender, showing him a photograph and chatting briefly. Then, to my relief, they left. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, grateful for my unkempt hair, thick beard, and mustache. The rough appearance I'd adopted over the years had served its purpose, making me look like a different man. If they had recognized me, they gave no sign, and for that, I was thankful. Even as the door swung shut behind them, the weight of their presence lingered, stirring up emotions I had worked hard to bury. It was a reminder that no matter how far you run, some parts of your past have a way of finding you again. Over the past few years, I had lost weight, though no one seemed to notice. Maybe it was the stress, or maybe I had just become invisible to the people who used to know me. That night, as I sat at the bar nursing my drink, I sent a short, cryptic message, "Come home when you can." It was directed at no one in particular but felt like a plea to myself, a call to find some kind of solace in this chaos. About half an hour later, the bartender, Tom, approached my table, his brow furrowed with concern. He slid into the seat across from me, a rare gesture for a man who usually stayed behind the bar. "What did they want, Tom?" I asked, my voice low but steady. "They wanted me to give you a message," he replied. "They heard a rumor that you live here and came to check it out. Said a woman named Willa is dying of cancer and wants to make peace. They asked for your picture, but I pretended not to recognize your name." I sighed, feeling the weight of their presence settle heavier on my chest. "Who are they, and what do they really want?" Tom hesitated, watching as I reached for a cigarette. I tore off the filter with a sharp motion and lit it, taking a slow, deliberate drag. The smoke curled around me like a protective veil as I replied, "The woman is my ex-wife's twin sister, and the young man? He's my ex-wife's illegitimate son, one she passed off as mine for years." Tom's expression darkened. "Based on your experience, do you think they're telling the truth?" I asked, tapping ash into the tray. Tom leaned back, crossing his arms. "From their body language, I'd say they're being partly honest. But they're hiding something. Something big." I nodded, a grim smile tugging at the corners of my lips. My ex-wife and her sister always were deceptive, skilled at appearing genuine while sticking a knife in your back. I'd bet my life they haven't changed. Tom gave a sympathetic nod and returned to his post behind the bar, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The memories clawed their way back to the surface, dragging me to nearly 7 years ago when I walked away from that life, vowing not to return for at least 7 years. I remember the way they laughed at me, mocking my promise as if it were nothing more than the tantrum of a fool. They had no idea how serious I was, or how deeply they had wounded me. They didn't realize that a few weeks before I left, I had uncovered the ultimate betrayal. Our youngest child, the one I had cherished and raised as my own, was not mine. He was my brother-in-law's son. That revelation had been the final blow, breaking whatever fragile thread still tethered me to that life. It wasn't just my own observations that had led to that truth. A family member, someone who had seen Willa and Tammy, the so-called evil twins, betray others time and time again, had provided me with undeniable proof. She called them black witches, claiming they practiced nothing short of pure evil. At the time, I dismissed the term as overly dramatic, but now, with everything I had endured, I wasn't so sure. I exhaled another plume of smoke, letting the past swirl around me like the haze in the room. Willa's supposed illness, the sudden desire for peace, and their unexpected appearance, it all felt like a chess game, with pieces being moved in ways I couldn't fully see yet. But one thing was certain, I wouldn't let them catch me off guard again. When I left, it wasn't a hasty decision, it was a matter of survival. We had recently uncovered something chilling, a life insurance policy taken out on me with a double indemnity clause for accidental death. The payout? A staggering $4 million if I happened to die in an accident. The discovery sent alarm bells ringing, and a wise old woman I trusted told me flat out to flee. Her words echoed in my mind as I walked to my work truck, pretending everything was normal. What Willa didn't know was that the truck was already packed with everything I truly valued from our 16-year marriage. I had been preparing for this moment in secret, knowing deep down that staying was no longer an option. Without so much as a glance in the rearview mirror, I drove away and didn't stop until I was 2 states away. The life I left behind was over, and I was determined to build something new. Looking back, I know some of this was my fault. Willa and I were young, too young. She was only 16 when she got pregnant, and I was 18, naive and unprepared for the weight of what lay ahead. My family insisted we marry, and soon after, we had 2 more children. At the time, I told myself it was the right thing to do, but the cracks in our foundation were visible even then. It wasn't long before my marriage became a source of ridicule, with Willa and others mocking me as if I were just a character in their comedy routine. After I left, Willa tried to save face. She told our daughters, "Your father will come back when he cools off. He just needs to regain his sense of humor." But I had no intention of returning. The bridges they had burned were beyond repair. Later that same day, her confidence was shaken when a sheriff's car pulled into the driveway. Willa, ever the charmer, greeted the deputy at the door with her usual bravado. "Are you Mrs. Willa Rhine?" he asked, clipboard in hand. "Yes, that's me," she replied, smiling. "Ma'am, you've just been served," he said, handing her a thick envelope. She laughed, assuming it was some kind of joke. But as she tore it open, her amusement quickly faded. Inside was my divorce petition, accompanied by a detailed inventory of our assets and liabilities. The contents left no room for doubt about why I was leaving. The packet included DNA results proving one of our children wasn't mine, as well as evidence of her year-long affair with her brother-in-law. There were receipts, photographs, and records of their meetings at motels, every sordid detail meticulously documented. And, as if that weren't enough, the petition revealed I was suing her husband for child support, infidelity, and defamation. The laughter stopped. For years, they had treated me as the punchline to their jokes, mocking me as nothing more than a paycheck. But now, the tables had turned. The joke was no longer on me. I didn't just leave quietly, I left with the truth on my side. Their betrayal, once hidden behind smug smiles and dismissive laughter, was now laid bare for everyone to see. For the first time, the spotlight wasn't on me, it was on them. And as much as they had tried to cast me as the fool, I was the one who had the last laugh. Everything I touched seemed to turn to gold. Over the years, I had built a thriving portfolio of businesses, investments, and properties, ensuring that Willa and the kids never wanted for anything. They were spoiled, living comfortably without ever understanding the effort it took to maintain that lifestyle. But that all changed when I left. What Willa didn't realize until later was that I had sold 3 of our businesses before walking away. I used the proceeds to pay off all of our outstanding debts and even sold our 2 apartment buildings at a hefty profit. Every financial move I made was calculated. I canceled all our credit cards, removed my name from every shared bank account, and signed over my half of the house to her. I took half of our net worth in cash, leaving Willa with what seemed like the lion's share of our assets but effectively cutting off any cash flow. What had been a comfortable $10,000 a month in income dried up overnight. Willa's sister, Tammy, eventually discovered the depth of the changes I had made, but by then, there was little they could do. For the first time in her life, Willa had to work. She quickly learned that money doesn't last forever when there's no income to replenish it. She had been so used to manipulating me into providing for her that she hadn't prepared for a life without my support. I took extra precautions, knowing that both Willa and Tammy were vindictive and cunning. I set up a rented FedEx mailbox and had all important mail forwarded there before being sent to my work address weekly. It was a small but necessary step to ensure they couldn't track me easily. I didn't question whether they'd try to retaliate, it was only a matter of when. Their family had a reputation for never letting things go. One day, I received an unexpected visitor at the house I had built for the Grand Dame, hoping she would one day leave her old home and move in. A young man named Peter arrived, claiming to be on official business. He was pleasant-looking, confident, and seemingly well-educated. But as we talked, I couldn't shake the feeling that he might be part of some elaborate scheme orchestrated by Willa and Tammy. After all, deception was their forte. I invited him inside, offering a seat in my home office. As he connected to my Wi-Fi and downloaded files onto his laptop, I studied him closely, wondering if he truly was who he claimed to be. The important documents stored in my office, including the master copy of all my records, were protected, with backup secured in a safety deposit box. I wasn't about to take any chances. During our conversation, Peter asked questions that made me wonder about his true intentions. I showed him the finalized divorce papers and let him make copies, though I didn't reveal that I no longer lived in the house full-time. I wanted to keep my cards close to my chest. While we talked, he mentioned Willa's version of events. "Mom told us Dad abandoned us," he said, his tone dripping with practiced bitterness. "She said he cleaned out whatever was left before disappearing. If it weren't for our stepfather, we wouldn't have survived." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Willa had not only betrayed me during our marriage but had also rewritten history, painting herself as the victim and me as the villain. I kept my composure, though anger simmered just below the surface. "I'll send you the legal file," Peter said, typing quickly. "Read it and contact me as soon as possible." I nodded, though I doubted I'd be contacting him anytime soon. As he continued talking, my thoughts drifted. Willa's manipulation knew no bounds, and it was clear she was still trying to control the narrative, even now. But I had the truth on my side, and I wasn't about to let their schemes undo everything I had built since leaving. I grabbed 2 bottles of Bud, popped the caps off, and slid one across the table to Peter. He took it, nodding his thanks. I sat back down, studying him as he took a long sip. "Why didn't you tell my daughter you found me?" I asked, cutting to the chase. Peter set the bottle down, his expression conflicted. "Connie and I have only been married for 2 years, he began, and we just had a baby. Honestly, I wasn't sure how much I should share yet. What I've learned, it's a lot to process. Did you know Mom and Aunt Willa have been twisting this story for years? Seth doesn't even know his origins, and neither do I. My sister, Karen, will be shocked. Mom chastised her for defending you, and now they don't even speak." He ran a hand through his hair, the weight of what he was saying clearly sinking in. "This whole story contradicts everything we've been told growing up. It's becoming clear that Mom and Aunt Willa gave you no choice. They've been manipulating your life for years." His words hit like a hammer, each one confirming what I already knew but hated to hear spoken aloud. He paused, his frustration boiling over. "And what really bothers me? The divorce isn't even finalized because Mom won't sign the papers. What's really going on here? I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence linger for a moment. It's true, I said finally. I got all the information from your father's lawyer. But don't tell your sister yet. If the district attorney decides to investigate, it's best to keep this quiet for now. Peter nodded, his face serious, and I stood up, giving him some privacy as he made a call. I busied myself in the kitchen, grabbing a couple of plates and setting them down, listening as fragments of his conversation filtered into the room. When I came back, Peter had just hung up, his expression pensive. Why do you want Connie to talk to Aunt Josie? Peter asked, his tone curious but cautious. I sat down and leaned forward, choosing my words carefully. Josie knows the truth, I said. She's the one who gathered all the information about Willa and George's affair. She's always been the quiet observer, the one who sees everything but says little unless it's absolutely necessary. She never married herself but raised her only daughter alone. Being a single mom changed her perspective on life, gave her clarity. Josie suspected Tammy and Willa were conspiring for years, and she's the one who uncovered how they used George to control everything. I trailed off, my mind momentarily slipping into the past. The manipulation, the lies, it was all so calculated, so cold. Josie's perspective will help Connie understand just how deep this goes. Peter nodded, processing everything. I let him sit with his thoughts for a while, sipping my beer and reflecting on how far I'd come. My life had improved in so many ways since leaving the past behind. But knowing Willa and Tammy, I had no doubt that their next move was already in the works. They'd go to any length for money, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. Later that day, I walked into my house, and my heart instantly lightened. 2 little kids ran up to me, giggling and grabbing onto my legs. I scooped them up, my 3-year-old and my 4-year-old, the apples of my eye. Their innocent laughter was a reminder of everything good in my life now. Just like their mother, they were a blessing I never expected but cherished more than anything. From the kitchen, my wife, Jody, called out, "Dinner's almost ready." Her voice carried warmth, the sound of a home filled with love and light. A few neighbors and friends were already seated at the table, chatting softly and passing plates around. As I held my children close, I couldn't help but feel grateful. Whatever storms might come, I had this, a family that loved me and a life worth fighting for. I couldn't help but smile when Jody teased me after meeting my grandmother for the first time. "You could have warned me," she said, laughing. "She's a wild bushwoman. Though I'll admit, she might look half-decent if she cleaned up." That humor was one of the things I loved most about Jody. Her quick wit made even the hardest days easier. The next morning, Josie contacted Jody's attorney, arranging for all her legal documents to be sent over. It was a small but meaningful step toward ensuring Jody had her own life in order, independent of the shadows of her past. As we worked side by side to build a new life, our relationship began to grow naturally. Everyone around us assumed we were already a couple, and neither of us felt the need to correct them. Josie kept us updated on events back home, though most of the news revolved around the chaos Willa and Tammy continued to create. Things became even more intriguing when we learned that Jody's ex had struck up a suspiciously friendly relationship with Tammy. It was hard not to speculate about what they might be plotting. The day Jody's divorce was finalized marked a turning point for us. We celebrated at the local bar with a group of friends, the mood light and joyous. During a slow dance under the dim lights, we shared our first kiss. It felt natural, like something that had been waiting to happen. 6 months later, we moved in together, blending our lives into one household. One evening, while the kids were splashing in the bathtub, I decided it was time for a change. I shaved off my beard and mustache, revealing a face I hadn't seen in years. The next week, I endured a barrage of jokes from neighbors and friends about my transformation. People couldn't resist poking fun. Did Jody have to blackmail you into joining normal society? One asked. Jody, ever quick on her feet, laughed and played along. He promised to bathe at least 3 times a week, she quipped, winking. Most people got the joke, though a few didn't. It was amusing to see how some acted when they believed they were superior. Amid the laughter and adjustments to our new life, an unexpected discovery threw us back into the chaos I thought I had left behind. Jody found out that the child support payments I had set up, through monthly annuities, weren't reaching the kids. Suspicious, we began digging deeper and uncovered something even more alarming, a $2 million accident insurance policy taken out 6 months before I left. The missing money and the timing of the policy raised too many red flags to ignore. That night, Jody and I stayed up late, combing through documents and forwarding everything we found to the district attorney's office. We were convinced this was a carefully crafted setup to lure me back into their grasp. The next morning, Jody wasted no time. She called the attorneys recommended to her and picked one she trusted. Together, we sent them all the information, along with a retainer, to prepare for what we knew was coming. As expected, it didn't take long for Willa's team to file a lawsuit against me in civil court. But we were ready. Before they could gain the upper hand, we served them with a countersuit, complete with recorded conversations, documents, and a list of names implicating them in their schemes. Through it all, Jody was my rock. Her calm determination and sharp instincts reminded me why I had fallen for her in the first place. Together, we faced the storm, knowing that the truth was on our side, and this time, I wasn't fighting alone. Seeing everyone gathered around the table that night was unforgettable. Peter and Connie, sitting side by side, carried an air of determination, while Karen and Josie's presence gave the evening a sense of purpose. "Good to see you again, Peter," I said, shaking his hand firmly after introductions. Jody had outdone herself with dinner, serving a feast that left everyone in awe: beef shoulder, creamy mashed potatoes with gravy, warm scones, Yorkshire pudding, string beans, and homemade apple pie for dessert. The kids settled down after their meal, giving us the quiet we needed to dive into the matters at hand. Peter spoke first, glancing at me with a mix of respect and unease. "First of all, Art, is it okay if I call you Dad?" he asked, his voice careful. I nodded, giving him a small smile of approval. "Then, Dad," he continued, "the district attorney believes Jody's ex's car might have been involved in your lawyer's accident. They're running a paint comparison to confirm." The room grew heavy with tension. Jody's jaw tightened, and I could see her mind racing. "What about the house and furniture?" Josie asked, steering the conversation back to our next move. "I've got the power of attorney to sell it all," I said. "It's time to leave paradise behind. I'll drive back with Peter and Connie, rent a truck, and haul everything out." "But this isn't just about moving." "What do you mean?" Peter asked, frowning. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. "The lawsuit against me is a ploy. It's a setup to lure me out. With a $2 million accidental death insurance policy in play, it's clear my former attorney's death wasn't random, it was a test run." The color drained from Peter, Connie, Karen, and Josie's faces as the implications set in. Their stunned silence was answer enough. Peter broke the silence. "We've arranged police protection for you at Josie's house until this is resolved." "But, Jody," he hesitated, turning to her. "Are you okay with using your children's father as bait to expose your cousins?" Jody's expression darkened. "What assurance do I have that he won't end up a victim?" she demanded. I turned to her, and she could see the resolve in my eyes. There wasn't an ounce of hesitation, and she knew me too well to think otherwise. "You'll do it no matter what I think, won't you?" she said, her voice thick with emotion. Josie placed a calming hand on Jody's shoulder. "Jody, Art has always been like that," she said softly. "That's why I called him when your ex was after you. Art doesn't ask anyone to do what he won't do himself. It's his nature." Peter shook his head, the weight of our circumstances clear on his face. That's exactly why Willa and Tammy were able to manipulate him for so long. He's too loyal, too willing to believe in people who don't deserve it. The conversation turned as we prepared for what lay ahead. Driving into the City of Refuge, the sign reading, "Welcome to City of Refuge." Population, 34,848 gave me pause. It wasn't just the name, it was the city's reputation. The local council had declared that federal laws didn't apply here, making it a haven for lawlessness. It was like stepping into the Wild West, where justice depended on the whims of the authorities. Law-abiding citizens faced prosecution, while others escaped consequences entirely. It was a skewed, twisted version of progress masquerading as fairness, and it left a bitter taste in my mouth. Later that evening, at a diner that had been recommended to us, I placed an order that wasn't on the menu. The server looked at me quizzically as I said, "Tell Jack that Art wants brown gravy and fried onions with the meatloaf." Her raised eyebrows and skeptical look made it clear she wasn't used to special requests. But as I waited for my food, the room buzzed with low conversations, and I could feel the undercurrents of tension in the air. This city wasn't going to make anything easy for us, but I'd faced worse odds before. Whatever was coming, I'd be ready. People must have thought I was crazy when I suddenly stood up and said, "Never mind, I'll tell him myself." Ignoring the bewildered looks, I pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen, the server trailing behind me, shouting my order. Jack, the head cook and an old friend, turned around, his smirk already forming. "You dumbass," he said, shaking his head. "You're a few weeks early. Welcome back, old friend." I laughed, the tension in my chest easing slightly. "Thanks, Jack. Good to see you too." Jack called over his shoulder to the server. "Susan, bring Art's coffee over here." He gave me a sly grin. "We'll make sure she sees you from behind first, so she doesn't suspect anything's up." Before I could ask what he meant, the kitchen door swung open again, and I heard Susan's voice, worried and urgent. "Jack, what happened?" "It sounded important," Sasha said, her words stopped short when she saw me. I stood up and turned around slowly. "Sasha," I said, my voice soft. Her reaction was instant. My little sister, who I hadn't seen in years, burst into tears and lost her temper all at once. "You jerk. You didn't tell me you were coming back," she yelled, storming toward me. I braced myself, but instead of hitting me, she threw her arms around me, squeezing me like she wasn't ever letting go. "My older, meaner brother is home," she said, her voice breaking. I hugged her tightly, holding on as though no time had passed. "It's been too long," I murmured. It took her a few minutes to calm down, her emotions cycling between anger, relief, and disbelief. Jack, sensing the moment's weight, motioned for the kitchen staff to clear out. "Give them some space," he said. Once we were alone, Sasha pulled back, wiping her face. "Do Mom and Dad know you're back?" she asked, her tone suddenly serious. "No," I replied. "And it's best if we keep it a secret for a few days." We were just starting to chat when a familiar vehicle pulled into the parking lot. Sasha's face darkened as she leaned closer. "Tammy's here," she whispered. I glanced out the window, watching Tammy step out of her car. "Where are you staying?" Sasha asked quickly. "At the Grand Dame's house," I replied. "I'm moving her things to the new place." She wanted to be away from whatever's about to happen. Sasha frowned. "Why did Josie leave town?" "She wanted to be closer to her granddaughter, and our two boys," I said, unable to hide the pride in my voice. "Jody and I have been together for over 5 years now. Our sons just turned 3 and 4. Sasha's jaw dropped. "Wait, what? You and Jody have kids? How did I not know this?" Before I could explain, Tammy glanced our way through the window. She didn't come inside. Instead, she turned on her heel and walked back to her car, clearly disappointed. Sasha let out a sigh of relief, muttering under her breath. Willa and Tammy's father has nothing to do with them anymore, Sasha said after a moment. Not since he found out the truth about Seth's real father. He says they turned out just as bad as their mother. That brought a grin to my face. I'm not surprised, I said. With that, our reunion wrapped up. I gave Sasha one last hug and left, climbing into the U-Haul I had rented earlier. The drive to Josie's house was uneventful but gave me time to think. I stopped to pick up packing materials along the way, arriving 3 hours later. Using the large side mirrors, I carefully backed into Josie's driveway, parking close to the garage door. Once parked, I got out and locked up the truck, surveying the quiet surroundings. The property felt peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. Just as I was about to unload, a familiar voice caught my attention. It was Jody, her words unmistakable as she called out from inside the house. I smiled to myself, thinking of her and the life we had built together. Whatever storms lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain: we'd face them together, stronger than ever. The garage door creaked open, and I climbed into the van to grab bundles of cardboard boxes. It was time to start packing up Josie's house. By 6:30 p.m., the smell of fresh pizza from Papa John's filled the air. When the delivery driver knocked, I opened the door. "Are you moving?" he asked, eyeing the boxes scattered around. "No, just helping a friend," I replied with a polite smile before closing the door. Later that night, around 11 p.m., Brad made his move. Using a tire iron, he picked the front door lock and slipped inside. The faint glow of the kitchen light guided him as he crept toward it. But I had anticipated this. As he stepped closer, I spoke, my voice calm but firm. "You're wasting your time, Brad. Child support? That's just another scam they're running. The divorce was finalized, Tammy just refused to sign the papers to manipulate me into coming back. You're nothing more than a pawn in their game. So, ask yourself, what are they planning for you?" Brad froze, caught off guard by my presence and my words. I continued, keeping my tone steady. "They're not done, Brad. Eliminating my lawyer was just the first step to get their original plan back on track. But now, you have a chance to stop them. Think about it. What does your gut tell you?" Brad's resolve wavered, and he sat down, realizing the depth of the trap he was in. I laid out the facts, including the truth about Seth's origins. He was stunned to learn that the $2 million insurance policy wouldn't pay out if the liquidation plan went forward. That was the final straw. By the time the undercover cops moved in, Brad was ready to confess. The entire exchange was recorded, and he revealed everything: his plans, Tammy and Willa's schemes, and their conspiracy. The next morning, as the door was being replaced and new locks installed, I stood outside, watching the locksmith finish up. Just then, my daughter Connie pulled into the driveway with Jody. The moment Jody stepped out of the car, she ran to me, tears streaming down her face. "Why didn't you call me?" she demanded, her voice shaking with emotion. Why did I have to hear about this from Connie? I placed my hands on her shoulders, looking into her eyes. "I wasn't in any real danger," I explained gently. "Brad surrendered to the police last night and confessed everything. He protected me in the end." Jody's tears didn't stop, but she nodded, understanding the weight of the situation. As the fallout unraveled, Tammy and Willa faced a mountain of charges: 3 counts of grand larceny, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit liquidation, and multiple fraud accusations. The district attorney moved swiftly, even meeting with the divorce judge to expedite the finalization of Tammy's long-delayed divorce case. Later, as the sun dipped low, we gathered in the den. My father, ever the proud patriarch, raised a fresh glass of beer. "I've got a lot of catching up to do," he announced with a grin. 7 years worth of drinks with my son. "And Jody, your engagement to Art. It's the best way to celebrate." The next morning, Jody and I headed to City Hall to pick up our marriage license. Friday was a whirlwind of preparation. Jody discovered she could fit into Connie's wedding dress, Jack agreed to be my best man, and Karen stepped in as Jody's maid of honor. That evening, I handed Jody an envelope. Inside was a bank promissory note for $100,000 and a short note that read, "Thank you for helping to fix karma. I always suspected the twins had a hand in their mother's liquidation. Watching them finally face justice will be the reward they deserve. And it's something my granddaughters will understand one day." Jody tucked the envelope into her purse, her expression unreadable but filled with quiet gratitude. As the festivities wrapped up, we hugged our daughters and parents goodbye before climbing into the U-Haul. The road stretched out ahead of us, promising a fresh start. For the first time in years, the weight of the past was finally gone. We were free.